Hello. Can y'all hear me? Testing audio. Testing audio. Oh, looks like it might be heard. We'll see. Yeah. And then let's go ahead and switch it to the main screen. Yep. Looks like people can hear me fine. Awesome. And then let's go ahead and switch over. As suggested. Turn on the cam. This happens sometimes. The camera doesn't actually detect. I think we're good now. We'll see. Yeah, there you go. Just gotta move in right angle. All right. I think we're good. Keep this stream nice and sweet. Now, the last stream that I did, and I've said I was going to do one like right away, like literally like the next day, but I didn't.
Wait, wait,
I'll
wait, wait,
start.
wait, wait, wait. Hold on, stop. Don't
Yeah.
show that work. It's NDA.
Oh,
I
I
just checked
wasn't
the
going to
email.
show anything.
Okay. All right, cool. Oh shit. That was close.
No, I wasn't going to show nothing. In fact, I'll double down. I'll, I'll delete stuff. No, I don't think you remember what I said in the messages. I said I wasn't going to do anything of that state.
I just
That
wanted to double check. I know that's what you said, but I wanted to make sure you were aware. Don't want to
no,
screw this guy over.
no. One of the things that um, I was talking to Michael about, just so you guys know why he's like, wait, no, is that because I get a lot of emails from people and even messages, and people ask me for advice and feedback on their work, and stuff that makes sense. It's like it makes sense to ask for feedback for this type of stuff, and especially because a lot of people feel lost and they're not sure of themselves. Now, I have a mentorship that's specifically tailored for this type of education. It's specifically to help people find their voices. Here, let me move this over a little bit closer. And, one of the things that I do with the mentorship is very much just, you know, help people out on a very personal level. As well as, we do a lot of art, we paint, we talk. It's great. But you know, I think it's really powerful to give some general advice that I think everybody can kind of understand and appreciate. I think a lot of the videos that have been archived and been posted on YouTube lately are a demonstration of the kind of stuff that I do. But what I'm trying to get at is that I can kind of do more live sessions with an audience, kind of address these things uh, live, as many of you guys begin to dive deep into the library of videos that I've been posting lately. Now, I'm not I'm not aiming to get large amounts of views or capitalize on this. This YouTube channel is more of a um, opportunity for me to help teach, and every once in a while there will be a marketing opportunity. But it's really the way that I've tailored it is to never do anything but teach and explain and try to help people out. Every once in a while, I might do something a little bit random, but the fundamental point of this channel is to teach. I think the last time I talked with you guys, I kind of mentioned this, but I also talked about like the state of the world, and then I'll talk about this type of stuff too. Because I think having someone's opinion that's in our field has some value, but obviously I am not an expert in all things, and it's just more of an opinion to kind of help a lot of you guys maybe have an opportunity to think it through. I I do want to like make this live session mostly about art though. So today we'll probably focus less on that kind of stuff and more about like art stuff, talking about art. Now, obviously, there are a couple of things that I will address, and then I'll just address them, you know, as politically correct and stoic as I possibly can, because it's pretty sensitive stuff. But clearly in the states we have a couple things going on, and I think by far the one of the most serious ones is actually with the national disaster or the natural disaster that's happening. Because there are a lot of people who are being displaced. We're going through COVID-19, and it's not like COVID-19 is just like, cool, man, like I'll take a break too, you know? So I'm really rooting for those people to kind of get out of this bad situation the best they can, and hopefully we can get some relief. And there's also like coastal areas and countries and locations that were also affected by that same hurricane that seem to never have gotten enough relief from the previous hurricanes, and it just kind of seems like it just keeps stacking on. Um, and so I would suggest that I know there's a lot of other stuff going on, like politically, especially in America, but those things have been ongoing. It's a continuous problem, and the way that I see it, it seems like a lot of attention is there. I just saw some stuff with the NBA and some other sports leagues are protesting, and I think that's pretty cool. But ultimately, like, it's crazy, man. There's like so much tragedy. It's hard to like just focus on one thing at a time. Even if you just look at COVID-19 in itself, like there's a lot of people who are losing their jobs, people who haven't paid their rent in the last month or two, and I think they just released the hounds a bit on eviction notices. I think there was a freeze before, but now there isn't. And this is specifically in the States. Most of you guys who may be in other countries and maybe you guys have gotten your act together, that's great. But keep your hearts in sympathy for places where I think we really need to kind of stay focused. And and then a lot of the other stuff, I'm almost positive I'll have an opportunity to talk more about, because there'll probably be another thing, if you know what I mean, which is the other sad part. But I think that's kind of what's been stressing me out. It's just like there's so many things, you know what I mean? But to me, that's pretty serious as well. Now, with that being said, for those of you who may be affected by this in any way or shape or form, you have my support, and if you are like, for instance, I think Texas got hit pretty hard. And because I know some people who've like had some of these tragedies hit them, and they like lose all of their equipment and all of their like stuff to make them do art. Just let me know, and maybe we can, as a community, band together to help you out. You probably are not listening to this at this moment, but if you happen to, the community, we got your back. Anyway, art stuff. Let's talk about art stuff. So,
Hard stuff.
yeah, it just feels weird to like not mention some of the stuff. You know what I mean? It's just like life is
Yeah.
great, guys. It's like it's not, man. There's a lot of tragedy. It sucks. Um, but let's go back on listening to the more positive stuff, and more uplifting and motivational stuff, right? So the thing that I saw, like I mentioned before, like people have a hard time understanding what they should be doing with their portfolio, and also just how to um, potentially advance their skills or even like move their abilities in a direction that that makes them happy, as well as build out a career. Now, I've been told many times in my career of what I should have done. Even recently, I've had a great experience with this layoff that I had several weeks ago, and it was great because I was looking to work in studio. I was working to gain experience again, because I've been working from home and working freelance a lot, which has been great. But I've been missing just like interacting with people, which was super funny, because as soon as I got this job opportunity, COVID-19 like hit, so I ended up going back into my cave. But the moral of the story here is that I learned a lot working with these individuals. I actually learned quite a bit. It was a very pleasurable experience, even though I worked very very hard. As some of you guys may have noticed, I was like radio silent for like a few months, and it was because of this. I was working. I was genuinely working to help solve some of the problems that the studio had ended up running into. Now, what I'm trying to get at though is that what I learned was just the amount of insecurity and amount of like lack of clarity that even at a professional level people have. Now, I'm not trying to say anything negative about any of the coworkers or people that I worked with. I'm just saying I've seen this throughout my whole career. It's not just this is the first time I've experienced it. No, I actually see it all the time. All the time. And this insecurity actually draws people to become more and more insecure and also drives them to work harder than they probably should. And what I discovered is it's just like what I've been able to do as a teacher is actually pretty valuable as a as like an art director because I was helping art direct a lot of these different projects. And what that is that sympathy, right? That understanding and empathy of another individual. Now, how does this relate to your portfolio? All of this stuff. Well, I'm trying to explain it from the position how I increase my own value, which is recognizing what I like and what I'm good at, right? And I like to help people, right? I just do. I've always have, and I've built a lot of my businesses that some of them successful and a lot of them not so successful. But it's always around the same kind of premise of like trying to educate and help, try to work on cool stuff, you know? And when you're building your portfolio, right? Like this is the same thing you should be encountering. You're going to maybe try a little bit more of a stylistic stuff. Maybe you're going to try a little bit of 3D. Maybe you're going to try a little bit of photo bashing. Who knows? You're going to do all kinds of cool stuff. Maybe you're doing a lot of environments, even though you prefer characters. But you're going to do it. And you're going to learn why you don't like it. And I think this is really important that people recognize that just because you may be good at something doesn't necessarily mean you may like to do it. A good example of this for me was that I'm really good at like just brute force work. Like if someone gives me a challenge, like from like a standpoint of like if I'm an employee, I do really well if there's like a very clear objective. And when I have that clear objective, I execute, as best as I possibly can. And this is again under the dynamic of me being employed by someone else, and I have a boss. Now, what I don't like about that specifically is the lack of control I have over a lot of different situations and personalities. Now, I normally, if I'm in a professional setting, I don't normally indulge in, affecting any kind of politics within the company. I just know that exists, and it's kind of annoying at times. But I realized that that's something that I was good at, though, was just doing the work. Then what I realized is that I was really good at, helping people. And like whenever I would do demos or workshops, I would get a lot of great feedback, both from people who went and saw what I've done in these demos and workshops, and just like how I felt afterwards as well. Like just like I was doing well, and I was getting a good response, and what was most important, I enjoyed it. Out of the many things that I have done in my career, the one thing that I have been pretty consistent on is just generally teaching. Meaning that I've worked for studios where I would do a little bit more photo bashing. I've worked on stuff where I was more working on sci-fi stuff, fantasy, realistic horror, all you name it. I've worked on all sorts of stuff. Like I worked on Sonic, the movie. You're like, wait, what? Yeah, exactly. I designed some of those robots, which then now kind of makes sense, right? Okay, I can see that. especially now that I'm drawing like a robot, right? Um, and I enjoyed it. I did well. I think the job was great. I had a fun time. But it's like I don't know if I would like to keep on working on Sonic for 7 years. I've been teaching for nearly 7 to 8 years now, and I don't really feel any less motivated by it. And what's important is when you're building your portfolio, you want to build a portfolio that is to your strengths, but as well as something that you generally enjoy, because it will become easier to master, and more importantly, whenever you take that opportunity, you will grow in a very positive way. Because unfortunately, we live under a circumstance that you have to make a living to survive in this specific type of culture. Okay, and I'm speaking to more of like an industrialized, westernized culture. Okay, um, and if you do these things as I suggested, right? Like you make money and you have a career, then you'll do all right. And whenever people are building their portfolios artistically, they always think about the job versus what they are, what they enjoy. Now, let me be clear. I wasn't always great at teaching, and I still even believe I can do better, right? I'm still learning every time I teach. But that's where that mastery is slowly but surely creeping. And with the 7 to 8 years of experience, you can tell that when I'm speaking and educating people, um, it hits different, right? A lot of times you hear people talking and explaining things, and you understand it. But whenever I explain things, for whatever reason, it hits people a lot different, and they feel like they understand a lot more of kind of the world that they're trying to jump into. And that's because of that mastery. That's because of all the times I've like really trained to be an educator, you know? And I know that this is true because even when I talk to other educators and then they learn something from talking with me, right? Like I remember one time I did a demo for the Academy of Arts, and my buddy like messaged me because he watched that workshop, and he's like, "I never thought about teaching the way you explained it," and I was like, "Yeah, man, like it's way more productive." And he's like, "I think you're right," and it's because I've experienced many, many different personalities, and I think that that's one of the most valuable tool for me to learn. But if you guys don't want to be teachers, it doesn't really matter. The point I'm trying to make is that if you whatever you want to do, you got to like apply yourself, right? And make sure that whenever you are going to the table to draw, you are drawing or working on the thing that you like. So even like right now, I'm like trying to learn programming even more again. I'm trying to make video games or card games and these types of things. Again, I'm trying to do it all on my own. And I'm excited about it. But, ultimately I'm again like I always think, well, once I figure it all out, I can't wait to teach people how to do it too. So you could still see like how that the roots of that will lead me to a path that will help educate people yet again. Like learning how to make games and maybe being successful in this excites me to the possibility that what if I do really well, I can really help other people do it too. I'll have a lot of lessons learned. Now, don't get me wrong, it doesn't mean that I have to do a really good project and make lots of money for me to be able to teach people how to do it too. Um, it just helps because I've learned a lot about game development from people who haven't done this, but they're really, really great, and they're very, very smart individuals, and they teach pretty well as well. So, going back to kind of the portfolio stuff, that's what I did with character designs, and like the experience that I learned. Oh, here comes my wife. Yes. Yeah, yeah. My woman coming in here with her tongue. They can still see you. It's okay. Uh, you know, when I had this job opportunity, and then like the layoffs and all that good stuff, I learned a lot about myself. I learned more about like my value, and now I'm like, okay, maybe I should lean into more of like a leadership position moving forward, and try to like avoid taking on too many jobs that doesn't really put me in that position. I saw my value after putting my time and effort into it. Now, whether other people will see that value, that's fine. I'm still fresh in that new leadership role, but I do believe that that's kind of where I should be going next to advance my career. But when I was going through some of these interviews with a lot of people, because a lot of people did reach out and interviewed me, which was awesome, great experience. A lot of the stuff that I think people are doing are more stylized, a little bit more um, fantasy driven too. I think it's very clear. There's like a lot of people going in one direction. I actually agree with this premise too, because a lot more games are just going to be easier to make realistic looking. But what I thought was great, was that people would look at my portfolio and they say, "Well, you don't have this in your portfolio, so we don't know if you can actually do it." It's so funny because this is like I know this is like a thing. In fact, this is what, if you guys have listened to me before, a student of mine in the past, you would know that like I literally tell people that this is a thing that happens. Like if you don't have it in your portfolio, there's a good chance people aren't going to believe that you can do it, right? And it was really bizarre to kind of like be on that cutting board in that way again, even though I was prepared for it. But I did try to like assure them like I am quite capable of doing it. In fact, I have done it a couple times. It's just not my number one, right? And for me, this position on the surface may have looked like, well, looks like Age not even taking his own advice. He's like he doesn't do stylized stuff. Why is he taking these jobs that are doing things that like is not a thing that he likes to do? Well, I'm trying to explain. Like I've actually discovered that teaching, mentoring, that's kind of where I really belong. Now, if you ask me like artistically what I like to draw, obviously you see it on my art station and whatever I paint. But what I get more pleasure from is to just like encourage people to get better. I really enjoy this. And like I said, if you know me personally and you've hung out with me or taken any of my classes, you know that this is a fact. You know, there's no doubt about it. And I always like to tell people like if I would have stuck with programming when I went to school, instead of you guys all being artists here, learning how to become better at art, it would be more about programming. I would be probably doing the same thing that I'm doing, but just with programming. If I happen to pick up knitting, I'll be here talking to you guys about knitting. you know, that is kind of the core, and you guys need to know what that is for you. And it may just be as simple as like I just love to build worlds, or I love character design. I like mech design. I like fantasy armor, like realistic armor stuff. Then that's the thing you need to like start to really double down on, because people will eventually reach out to you for that specific job. And today I even had an interview for a freelance gig, and it was very much like, hey, we're building a reference board. We saw your work on ArtStation, and we realized that you might be available for work, so we reached out to you. And they're like, we want you to do something that's based off of what was in my portfolio. And I'm like, yep, that's perfectly reasonable. In fact, incredibly smart, right? Because if you know that I'm capable of doing this said work, then it's going to be easy for everybody involved, right? If they know that I can produce really amazing tasting apples, and they're looking for that, I'm going to be able to provide that. And I think whenever people are building their portfolios, this is the kind of thing that they tend to struggle with. And I think if you're just first starting out and you're trying to build out your style and what you really are, I think it's okay to kind of just copy and paste what you see other people do. Like just get the hang of something, build some confidence. But ultimately, you do want to like sit still and build that mastery, and that mastery may change as time goes on. When I mentioned like the art stuff, you know, because when I first started, it was clearly more naive because I just wanted a job. I wanted to work in the industry, And once I got that, I realized that I should probably focus in a little bit more on something that's a little bit more meaningful. Although otherwise, I might fall off the wayside. But anyway, that's kind of my general advice. I know there's a lot of people writing in the comments, so I'm going to go ahead and read some of this stuff. But if you have any other questions about anything, feel free to ask. I'm going to hang out for another 15 to 20 minutes. But I do see I see a couple things. I think, Mike, did you snag some comments?
Yeah, let me let
Get
me
that
save my name.
noodles off of
I'm sorry.
your
My
eating
noodles are in
noodles.
my throat. No, I ate it already. I think I'm just joking.
They're just
All right.
still in your throat.
Let's see here. Um, Questions. Hey, Anthony, I'm sure you answered this question before, but how do you find pleasing designs and how do you go about thinking of big, medium, small? Thanks. From Horia,
Oh boy.
Horiah.
Um, so the big, medium, small stuff. Um, the best way to get good at this, and the best way that I like to explain it nowadays, is to recognize that that's something you should be doing. So that's the first step in the right direction. That you are like, I need to be better at that. Awesome. The second step is to actually check your work, right? So you begin by, you begin actually by doing a design, and then after you've done the design, take a look at it and see that if you actually done it. And you might realize you haven't, and so then correct it. You know, uh, a good way of thinking about this would be like, you know, if you go to play basketball or something, and you go to shoot the ball and you miss, right? And you shoot the ball again and you miss, and you shoot the ball again and you miss. But maybe you just notice that you're like every time you're not really in control of like how you're handling your arm movement. So then you're like, okay, maybe I need to like have a better system of arm movement, so that way I can shoot the ball because you should make the goal, but you just for whatever reason something's holding you back. And so you do some research, you do some studies in terms of, or you do some practice drills on that movement, and then you try again, and it might not be it, right? So then you try something else. So a parallel to art would be like, okay, so you recognize you should do these shapes. That's like shooting the hoop. Um, but do you do any exercises? Do you do any drills to kind of like make you understand that principle idea at a very small scale? For instance, having a small composition and drawing shapes inside of this, that just with these shapes, the image looks appealing. It's very graphic, it's very simple, but can you do it? What happens if you introduce another shape? Can you introduce one and still make it feel appealing? A lot of people don't do basic stuff because basic stuff isn't interesting. Basic stuff is basic. And yet is by far the most powerful set of tools that you can give yourself to get real good real fast. And what I love about doing basic training in most things is that it's very simple and it's very easy to like replicate. You just gotta do it, and that's the part that's not easy. And the reason why I think most people can't do it is because of the reasons I mentioned before. It's not fun, but rarely anything worth doing is, right? Like it's not fun to shelter in place, right? It's not fun to eat your vegetables. It's not fun to go and do an incredibly challenging exercise like going on like a 20-mile hike or something crazy. And that's a little excessive, but you get the point. But to get good results in whatever field that you're trying to get good at, you kind of have to do some of these things. And so that's the same thing. I think when people think about shapes, they're like, They're hoping that I would say something that's like, oh, once I do this, then I can just do it. If you already know the fundamental idea about small, medium, and large, then it's not a matter of you not knowing that that exists. Sometimes people don't even know about that. Now it's just a matter of you actually being able to check your work, correct it, try again, do smaller exercises, doing drills, and then coming back and trying again. Because I honestly do not think about it at all. I just draw, and it just comes out. But that's because of just that repetition of training. Any other
All
question?
right. All right. Yeah, I probably shouldn't have ate before we stream. I eat spicy noodles too, so I'm like sweating. Okay.
Oh man.
Jacob, I'm contagious. Jacob says, "Hey Anthony, might remember wrong, but did you start looking into programming? If so, are you still do you still do it? And what is your future view on it?"
Yeah, I just mentioned it earlier in the stream. Programming to me um, is a lot of fun, and it's just as challenging as becoming good at art. Um, and I think programming gets a bad rap because of the complexity of it. Um, but it's actually a lot easier than being good at art, in my opinion. You know, meaning that like programming, like some sort of simple game, especially now, it's like even easier. It's not really as challenging. Now, what I will say is challenging within the programming world is something that I am trying to get good at, but like I have a hard time even getting started because it's that challenging to me. Is graphics programming, like programming for visual effect,
UI and
like
stuff.
not UI, but like visual, like fidelity. A good example of graphics programming, like graphics engineering, would be like creating the Unreal Engine's renderer.
Oh,
Do,
I see.
do you see what I'm saying? Or like you
Yeah.
use Blender for instance,
Hmm.
like creating the Eevee renderer, like not Blender itself, right? Like the actual creating of the tool, I don't think is nearly as challenging as actually creating the rendering aspect of the tool. Okay.
Incredibly complex computational systems,
Yeah, and
right?
it's really mathematically heavy.
Yeah.
It's like whenever they say you need math in programming, generally if you're ever dealing with anything that makes sense, like physics, trigonometry, these type of things, right? Like like predicting trajectory of objects and stuff like this, like in gaming, that's where math really comes. But a lot of that stuff is now engineered for you. There's a lot of shortcuts to it, and it's not. And even if you had to engineer it on your own, there's some stuff that's just not that complicated. There's already a lot of algorithms that exist that there's it's like why fix something that ain't broke type of situation, you know.
Yeah.
But what I mean is like calculating matrices of vertices, then determining within those vertices how light and uh, like shadow is going to be rendered onto that triangle depending on other circumstances in the environment, from global illumination to uh, the shadow intensities and biases like that. Do you see what I'm saying? Like that, like you're taking for granted for all the ease of access to this stuff, right? But that's my point. Like being able to program that. Uh, I'm not even saying I want to build a rendering engine. I'm just saying like being able to, let's say, create a really complex or interesting shader that you can't just get from using the shader nodes, right? Or even
Okay, I
something
get what
that's or even something that's even more optimized because you're not using the shader nodes, right? Because you are thinking
you're saying.
about it more fundamentally versus more like, okay, how can I with these nodes, how can I get the effect that I'm looking for, right? Without realizing that it might actually be much simpler if you just knew how to code shaders. You know what I mean? And
Get all hardcore,
yeah,
core parkour.
which is usually true for most things. Like it's so much easier to
Sure.
render materials and stuff if you know how materials are rendered, right?
Yeah.
That knowledge, and we talked about this a little bit, right? When you were showing me your scene that you built, that knowledge
Mhm.
of like understanding materials and lighting actually is useful when you're building a shader, let's say in Blender, because you are thoughtful of like all you need to convince somebody else looking at your image of what you're trying to say that thing is, right? And so you're not gonna like over engineer something just because like under
Because
the
you can.
hood everybody's like, oh, cool, impressive, because you use all those nodes super clever. It's even more clever if you're using less nodes because you just know fundamentally how things should look and realize there's no
Mhm.
need for all these extra stuff and bells and whistles.
Yeah,
Like when
and it
I
also relates. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, like whenever I see those like those node trees from substance designers, like I'm like,
Those
why, dude?
nightmare scenes.
Yeah, but that's to supplement their probably their inability to like manufacture that same pattern or design by hand, which is totally why that tool exists. It's totally understandable. But I don't need that tool because every time I look, I'm like, well, I can just make my own tileable textures like by hand because I know how to paint and photo bash and use 3D pretty well. You know,
Yeah.
it's actually faster, and you think, oh, well, the iterative part of it, right? Like, how can you iterate? Because with that, you can really iterate, which is totally a thing. Um, yeah, you don't have to iterate if you just get it right the first time. you know,
Of course.
yeah, like you're
A
only
lot of this
iterating. Yeah, go ahead. I'm done.
sorry.
No, I'm done. No, no.
A lot of this relates to how you teach speed and efficiency. It's just like it completely carries over to things that aren't painting,
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely. Yeah,
It's just
absolutely.
in general, like being good at your craft. Um, there's an element of speed that and efficiency that can really improve your decision making if you pay attention to it, and that it's something that you want to achieve. Um, in my experience and opinion, and I don't know how your stance is on this, but I find that starting out with focusing on efficiency and steps, like for example, in some of your lectures, you talk about having students practice finishing a painting in a certain amount of brushstrokes. I think that's a way more efficient way of training someone to improve their efficiency and speed than uh, timers when you're starting. In my
Yeah,
That's my opinion.
yeah. There's many ways. Timers
Yeah,
is still my preferred strat.
but you're a monster. But no, it works. Everyone's different, you know.
Yeah, timers is definitely still my preferred strat. But like you said, there's multiple ways to learn how to do a thing. You know,
Yeah,
and I always encourage to do all of the things. you
I'm
know.
I'm definitely taking a lot of your lessons into my future in Blender. Like I've been thinking about a lot of the things you've taught me in the process of making the scene I've been making. So
Yeah, man, and it turned out great. You did a
you're
good
a
job.
great teacher.
All right, whatever, dude. Next question.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. All
Next
right, so
question.
next question is from Zanbin. He says, "Do you do portfolio reviews, or have you thought about doing portfolio reviews on your live stream? And if so, what is your preferred way of being asked?"
Yeah, so this is the reason why I even did this stream because I do get offered a lot of questions about this specific thing. Um, I will be doing some sort of portfolio review session during the Lightbox Expo sketch group stuff that we have planned in the coming weeks. So that'll be a thing. But like generally speaking, I don't do it because I reserve a lot of that for my mentorship, and also it's just like portfolio reviews, in my opinion, is not exciting because there's usually a few symptoms, and everybody's portfolio is pretty consistent. If that makes sense, you know, like it's not that engaging. Like there's a couple things that people will do wrong, and it's usually one of these things or all of these things. The number one thing that I think a lot of people do wrong is they build a portfolio to get a job, meaning that they'll just do whatever it takes to get a job. So they'll put like graphic design, they'll put like environments, characters, props, like everything, the works, you know? And nothing really is any good. Everything's kind of just generally good. And so I usually tell people when they think this way, like go to like ArtStation, look at some of your favorite artists, and try to find somebody who's like legitly good at like several different things at like a mastery level, And you might find a couple people that are pretty good at like multiple things, but then if you compare those individual things to, so, let's say, someone that is a specialized individual, like for instance, you take a look at somebody who has a good character and environment portfolio, like both of these things. But then if you take their characters and compare it to someone who only has characters in their portfolio, there's a very clear difference. Like the person who has only characters usually dominates, and then vice versa. If you look at the environments compared to the best environment artist, same story. But yeah, you don't have to take my word for it. Just go online, look at some of your favorite artists, and look at their so-called portfolios, and you will see a very consistent pattern, which is focus. They have a thing, and they do it a lot, and they're real good at it. Um, and so that's one of the things. So it's just too many. You're doing too many things. There's not enough time in a day to get so good at all the things in a short amount of time, especially if that's your timeline to try to get a job. But if you're trying to get good and you don't mind, then yeah, it's going to take you quite a while, but you can eventually get good at a lot of things. Like, there's a guy that I love who makes these great Blender tutorials, Ian Hubert. Um, you can see that he has a specialty too. He really loves a very certain genre of aesthetic, you know. But he's real good at it. You know what I mean? But it shows me that he's also just generally good in Blender. Like that's his specialty too. He's clearly like a visual effects artist, and that's something you should pay a lot of attention to. And then the second thing that I think, the other thing that I usually see in people's portfolio is just straight up just the quality, because the first one actually amplifies this idea. But let's say you do have a very specific goal in mind and you have a very specific journey that you want to pursue in terms of career, but the quality is just low. And so the problem that people generally have in this sphere is that they don't know where they live, so they become incredibly doubtful of their prospects. But the reality is that they're closer than they think, or they're further than they think, right? And this is usually the second problem. It's just the quality of work. So going back to that first example of like, oh, you want to go on ArtStation, just look for yourself. You don't take my word for it type of situation, like just generally look and see what other people are doing portfolio wise, right? And you can just kind of immediately understand where you live, but respecting that. And I think a lot of times whenever I would look at portfolios, people would be like, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. And that statement's true, that's why they're asking me. But I tell them, but you can find out what you're doing wrong. And that's what you can, really comment as a big problem. So let me make this a little bit more clear. So let's say you want to work for Pixar, right? And you've shown your artwork to many of the Pixar artists or people in animation, and they give you feedback that seems pretty conflicting. It doesn't seem like the advice that you think you needed to hear, right? They're like, oh, you need more of this in your portfolio. And you've heard someone like myself and others say, no, definitely pick a thing and get real good at it. And you're just like, what? And so now you're double confused. But this is my point, is that if you were really good at what you did, they're not going to say, oh, you just need more of this in your portfolio, right? They're going to say, kind of like what I mentioned earlier about when I was taking these job interviews. They're going to say pretty much what they said to me, which was that, you just don't have what we're looking for specifically in a portfolio, but we do love the work that you do. We think you have great work. They don't actually give me the advice of like, I need to do this too to get like more opportunities. No, they're just like, we just don't think you fit, but we're not worried that you're gonna not get a job either. You know what I mean? Because they're capable of seeing my work and seeing that it is of a certain quality. And what ends up happening is people, when they don't realize that their work is just not up to a high quality, they generally start to blame other circumstances to why they're not getting jobs. When the reality has probably always been the quality of your work. But this is why it's important to get portfolio reviews. Hence, why someone will bring up this question. It's a great point. You want to get your portfolio reviewed as much as humanly possible by anybody. Don't think you just have to always have it reviewed by other experts. Like, just go to forums and channels. There's going to be some people there that have a good eye for what's good, and some people that don't. But then it's good to know why those people think that way. You don't have to deep dive into the psychology of that individual, but you can start to question why some people have a certain feeling, especially if a reoccurring theme keeps popping up. Hey, your artwork's too loose. Hey, your artwork's too loose. Hey, your artwork, like, if you just hear that, no matter where you go, maybe your artwork's too loose. And if that's what you're trying to go for, you want to go for looseness, then maybe you're not doing a good job of making loose good work, right? Artwork that looks loose but feels really good.
Intentional.
Yeah, that is intentional. But you shouldn't be like, nobody understands me. That's really dangerous and too abstract to kind of move on of an idea. But usually
Yeah.
quality is a big problem because it's very distracting. And it's also distracting in the other way where, let's say you are really good. Like, I look at your portfolio and I'm like, yeah, you can work like today, literally. Like, you're so good. There's plenty of those people. They also have the same idea. They also think that, like, what's wrong with me? So if your quality is objectively good, like if you share it to people and everyone just like loses their mind, they're like, no, this is like the best thing I've ever seen in my life. Like, and now you're like, but I don't get jobs. Everyone loves my work, but nobody gives me an opportunity. That's totally reasonable too, a reaction. But but then again, instead of looking at it for what it is, right? Being like, okay, so my quality is there. What am I missing? Uh, Sometimes people will think that there's no jobs available or there's no like people hiring or whatever. No, it's usually because nobody knows that you exist. These same people also don't post their work ever. In fact, they post it like once every full moon, and they're like, "Why doesn't anyone know I exist?" And it's just like, because nobody literally knows you exist. You know what I mean? And this is what I love about telling these types of individuals this very thing. It's because once I tell people that I think are already pretty good, hey, post more often. Like, literally, I tell these individuals, I swear, like, literally a week or 2 weeks later, or even like a month or a few months later, they write back to me like, I got a job. And they're like, all I did was post more. I post more often. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. That's what I said you should have done, and that's what you did, and now look at you. There's a direct correlation to my success too with my courses. The more I share stuff online, the faster my courses sell out. The more I share online, the more people buy my tutorials. As you are listening now, there's many of you guys hearing that, wait, he has tutorials? Hey, wait, he has classes? Um, Even right now, as I speak, there's many of you, or a few of you rather, that are like, hey, I want to get some classes. Hey, I want to get some tutorials. That's my point. But if I didn't post or talk or even do anything or even mention, or even just really the fact that I didn't even do anything online, right? How would you have known? Even the fact that you guys are in my live stream, and this is another thing too. Right now, I have about like 90 or so concurrent users, which is pretty good. But on average, when I was streaming like pretty much every other week, or every week rather, we were getting to 100, 15, 120, and that would keep growing every week because of that consistency, that reliability. So there's definitely a correlation there. And the best way I like to think about it is like always try to be in the feed. You know, the algorithm is paying attention to what people click on and what people like. And if you keep posting stuff that people like, they're going to keep on seeing your feed first. But you have to have something for them to actually click on and like. You know, there is one of the most popular YouTubers on YouTube, which is PewDiePie. I think by far is single-handedly the number one person in terms of individual, not a corporation or a company or anything, like an individual has the most streamers, or sorry, subscribers. He has been pretty consistently posting something on his YouTube for nearly, I don't know how many years, 6 or 7 years, pretty much every
Yeah.
day. And every once in a while, he'll take like a month or a couple weeks off, but not as often as you think. Like, literally, like it'll be like a year before he does it again. Like, takes like a break, you know, which is totally reasonable, you know. But he is like constantly posting, and and it's exponential, meaning that At first is like, a couple here, a couple there, then it's a couple like dozen here and there, and then it's a couple hundred here and there, and then a couple thousand here and there, to a point where I think he's starting to get like a couple million every other month, which is crazy, right? But he is posting. He just has like literally thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of videos out there that people are just they just like his personality. They like the things that he talks about. He's a very funny guy, very charming individual. As much as people try to hit on him, but I think he's all right. But that's kind of the point, though, is that like you take a look at any other YouTube. Let's not even use PewDiePie. Maybe you don't like the guy. You're like, well, he's not a good example because he just posts like easy stuff. Well, look at any other person who may post stuff that's not necessarily as easy. Look how often they post, like the frequency of it, and you'll see the same pattern. So this is usually like the two things that I always try to mention on whenever I review people's portfolios, though, right? Is whether they are varying their work too much or their quality is misguiding them. Meaning, if their quality is really bad, they think that everything else is bad, but not really their work. But when it's really good, they blame everything else around them instead of looking at like alternate ways to promote their portfolio. And usually, like I said, even some of you guys who may think you have good work will start posting. You will see what I'm talking about like right away. And for those of you who don't, there's still no reason not to be posting often. Nobody keeps a record of all the bad artwork you've done, except for yourself.
Yeah, nobody cares.
Yeah, most people like think about yourself, right? When you scroll through feeds and you see artwork that you don't really have any opinion on, do you stop and stare and think about how bad it is, or do you just keep scrolling?
Keep it
That's
pushing, you forget about it,
yeah,
and then one day maybe you see something that you're like, wow, that was sick. That's all that matters. Is
yeah,
when you get to that moment.
yeah,
You as the artist. Also, on what you're saying, another angle to look at that is like you're saturating the market, right? Like you're just making sure that there's more opportunities for clicks, whether it's art or posting on socials or YouTube, things like that, right?
yeah.
If you really saturate the market, then you can eventually, when people start searching for things, like you might be several of the sources that come up.
Yeah, and this is just true for a lot of things. Like sometimes I see people post a lot of things that have nothing to do with art, and then their feed is surrounded by stuff that has nothing to do with art, and then they complain about how all they see is nothing that has to do with art. The algorithm is listening to what you're doing, you know, and
Yeah,
so you got to be aware that that's true for others as well, right? In fact, I realized that, and this is something I'm going to try with this piece of artwork. We'll see how it goes. But I have a suspicion it's going to go well, which is I'm going to ask a question, right? Or I'm going to ask something
a call
about
to action.
the artwork and see how people react to it, specifically on Facebook, right? And I have a suspicion it's going to do well, right? And the reason why is because I've come to learn that Facebook really prefers interactivity over just static stuff, right? And a lot of my images are incredibly static. It's not telling a story, aggressively or like really on the nose. It's not like a meme, where it's like it'll say something like, people who wear MAGA hats have this disorder, or people who are liberals have this disorder, right? Which is very polarizing. Either of those memes ideas, right? And then people will have opinions, and they'll go all in, right? And I see those things do really, they just like stay in feeds forever, for years, you know.
Yeah, it's that engagement.
It's
Yeah,
because of that engagement. I always talk about how social media will keep you there whether you like it or not. Meaning that even if you don't like what's being said, you're still
they'll
there.
do anything they can to
Yeah,
keep you there.
you're still there, and it will remind you that you forget to get diapers for your kids at the same
Yeah,
time.
it'll eavesdrop on your conversations
It'd be
and then
like,
sell you things later.
yeah, it's like, oh, by the way, I know you're in the middle of this heated battle, but don't forget, you need to go get dog food. You know, you're like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
I need to go do that, and you're going to the PetSmart, angry, full of rage, but you did buy that dog food. you know, and so or
Yeah.
you've made an Amazon purchase. Like that's what they want. And you can basically do that same tactic, but at least it'll be a little bit more. It'll be less nefarious, right? It'll be more about building your brand and your reputation as an artist, right?
I remember,
And
go ahead.
yeah, that's it.
I was gonna give it another instance. I remember there was this time I was messing around painting like a black guy, and
Yeah,
I painted this guy with an afro, and I thought this is all in my head. I thought in my head I was like, uh, I always give him afros. I want there's so many cool like you know black hair styles. I'll give him cornrows now, but it'd be kind of cool to like figure out some other cool styles, so it's not always afros.
yeah,
And then like later that day, YouTube gave me a recommended video on African hair styles, painting them. And I was like, what the? You're in
yeah,
my head?
yeah. They're listening, dude.
Like,
Always and
I didn't
forever.
say anything out loud. I was in Photoshop and thinking, and it like still knew.
Yeah, it's just
It's so
because.
weird.
Yeah, it's just because and I think you're wise to this. I don't think you're naive to this. It's
Uh,
because like human behavior is predictable. We like to think that it isn't, you know, but
yeah.
like you could totally predict without hearing those thoughts out loud. Does that make sense? Like
No, totally.
like based off of the pattern of searches and clicks and locations and uh like cultural influences, that's enough. They can be like, oh, this person's probably like looking for this too, you know, like, and uh, it seems super sketch, but it's like that's what they've been doing, you know. And it's so funny when people got really like really angry with TikTok, for instance, for like tracking a lot of data, and and
Every other
TikTok's
app
like,
doing the
dude,
same
every other
exact
app
thing.
does it, man. And they're like, yeah, but you're China, so we don't like
All the other apps are
that.
trying to too.
And it's like you can still track that at some level by going to just any of these websites, right? You can buy ads to pander to a specific group of people without ever having to look under the hood. Facebook is not, you know, neglecting China's ability to actually have some access to your data. You know what I mean?
I
It's
only
just so
want
it's just so
red-blooded
funny.
Americans stealing my data.
Yeah. um,
You want to get another question? Are
yeah,
you,
let's
you
do one
done?
more, and then I'm gonna roll out
All
here.
right. Let's see. The next one was Battle says, "Hey AJ, has the success of indie AAA games by smaller teams like Hellblade,
Yeah.
post Microsoft purchase, and Mortal Shell contributed to your interest in pursuing your game creation skills?"
Oh yeah. My buddy Vitelli made Mortal Shell, and I knew when he said he was gonna make that game. He's the kind of individual, and he says he's gonna do it. He very well will do it, and he did. And it's super exciting. And it's not like what I love about what happened too is it's not like it was kind of like a cool indie game for an artist like him. No, it like made mainstream game news. And I knew that it was big where when I was like on the PlayStation store and I saw it was like on the front page and I was like, "Damn, that's crazy." And then also what I loved was that like I watch a lot of YouTube videos from a lot of different people, and sometimes people do gaming. There was this guy that I watch. He's like a vegan channel, and he literally was playing the game. It was weird. It was so weird, very surreal. You know, to be like, oh, dude, I know all about this project that Vitaly was working on, and it's cool to see it like even in the hands of somebody I would have never expected to see it play. Like it was like worlds colliding. You know. But with that being said, yeah, I'm not necessarily interested in just wholesale. Got to make that money, you know. It's important that like I enjoy the process as well as it's meaningful. And I think the small studio AAA thing, what's cool about that is that there's a real opportunity to make you know um, a lot of good money if you're just independent. Um, but what I also like about it is that you can kind of make the sort of games you like, and if you know how big your audience is, you don't have to make them like very big. You can make them small. Like I keep thinking of the kind of games that I want to make. I keep thinking small, simple, and that way I can just put it out there, and a very few people need to like it. I don't need like millions of people to like it. I just need like a few 100,000 for it to be considered a genuine success. You know, at a AAA level. But if I make tens of thousands of people like it, then that's enough to make me have time to make another one. It'll justify the time that was spent on that first one. But it's not gangbusters, and it's what I love about this AAA indie studio vibe is that that's a reality. I can self-publish, I can self-distribute, and that's probably what I'm going to end up doing. I'm excited about that specifically. But anyway,
Like an element of self-fulfillment.
yeah, because
I know what you're going
ultimately,
for.
once I do that, I'm probably going to teach other people too. you know, and like I mentioned in the very beginning of the stream, this is kind of what I enjoy. And in terms of longevity of career, it's a smart choice because teaching is a very lucrative career path because everybody wants to learn the things they want to get good at, right? Everybody wants to get good at certain things, even if they don't want to make a career out of it. There's plenty of people like that. And
There's an
so,
element of like pride when you see one of your students succeeding as
oh
well.
yeah,
Like
absolutely,
I helped that person along the way.
yeah. And like I said, I prefer that over a lot of other things. But anyway, hope you guys enjoyed today's stream, and I hope you guys enjoyed this robot soldier thing that I drew. It's been a
It looks
while
tight.
since I've drawn something like this, and also the way that I drew it, I was using a lot of kit bashing or painting bashing.
Yeah,
Makes it
you
go
got a
much
tutorial
faster.
about that.
I did, but anyways, I appreciate you guys. Thanks again for hanging out. Like I said, this will probably be more regular, but don't expect a schedule just yet. I don't really know if this will be scheduled. It'll probably just be, hey, I have time now. Let's do it. So just always just keep an eye out whenever they come out, and then
Hit the
until
bell.
yeah, until then, I'll talk to you guys later. Cheers, friends.
See ya.